Hello and welcome to episode 11 of The Hex with Daniel Robertson, John Arnold, Armand Kafai. Boys, we're back. We took a little bit of a break last week. Sometimes life gets in the way, but we're back. There's a champion in Mexico, a champion in MLS, and lots to talk about. So lots of news. It is that time of year where there's news coming around more than matches. And in the Liga MX final on Sunday, Mikel Arreola, the president of Liga MX, he announced that Leagues Cup is going to be a format change. John, we kind of knew this was coming, but there's going to be no break in Liga MX or MLS next summer for Leagues Cup, and the matches are going to be played midweek. Do you see this as a positive?
I think the Leagues Cup needed modifications. I think that's pretty clear. The tournament sort of ended up being MLS Fest for a couple different reasons. And I think when we watch the CONCACAF Champions Cup, we know that sporting wise, that probably shouldn't happen. But when all the games are played in the US, yeah, that's going to happen sometimes. I think midweek makes it tough because the one thing I will say is that when you have the Leagues Cup break, it feels different. It
Yeah, they
feels
have
like
camps.
its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different things that kind of set it apart. And this, I think, will be a challenge for MLS and Liga MX and the Leagues Cup organizing committee. It'll be a challenge for them to set this apart from CONCACAF Champions Cup. Why is this different now? What's better or worse or even the same about it? I think that's the challenge they're going to have because fans already are trying to find reasons to buy in or have decided they don't want to buy into this tournament. And Armand, in a way, they got to make sure this thing doesn't feel like Diet CONCACAF Champions Cup, right?
Yeah, I mean, and right now it feels like Diet CONCACAF Champions Cup, especially
Maybe so already. Maybe
with
so.
I don't think
with
it does.
with the way they want to format it. It seems like it. It seems like from the reports that we're hearing, right? It's like 18 teams that made the playoffs, and then you also have the all the Liga MX teams playing each other for more
We're gonna get into
midweek
that. We're gonna get
games.
into that part.
But like, I'm not. To me, it just if this is the case, like with Leagues Cup, the pause made it feel like something, right? Like there was something going on, but it also ruined like seasons, I'd probably say, and was a big interruption to the Liga MX season we had, which would just start during that moment, and the MLS season, which was kind of going towards its end. Now it's midweek, and it's like you already have
But what is the
Triple
point of Leagues
C
Cup? But what is the point of Leagues Cup in the
to
first
make
place? That
money.
okay, but that's what you need to identify because the point of Leagues Cup is to determine who is the better league or who is the better teams or anything like that. It's pretty clear that in the current setup, MLS dominates it, and they have. But I think that gets Liga MX to be like, hey, this is the deck is stacked against us. But does this really change anything? Because you're still gonna have teams. So Armand, you alluded to it. I was reading Paul Tenorio's writing about it on The Athletic. He said multiple sources briefed on the changes. Basically, the 18 teams in MLS that made the playoffs are going to be in Leagues Cup, and the rest of the teams that aren't are going to be in the Open Cup, while League MX will have their obviously 18 teams. And so you're going to have teams traveling to Vancouver, traveling to Seattle, traveling way up north for one-off midweek matches. Not, oh, we're playing all of our games in this one little pod. So does it really like help that situation, John, that I think Liga
It's
MX
tough
teams are
to
already
say the
mad about?
product. It's tough to say the products will get better, right?
Right.
And I think, in some ways teams will choose. I don't have a problem on the MLS side. I think it looks sort of like back in the day in Liga MX where the top teams would go to the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the middle teams would go to the Libertadores. There was a Copa MX for some teams. So I don't have a problem with that, like kind of segmenting which teams get involved. I
No,
think
I don't
that can
either.
work well. But since every Liga MX team is going to be in League and Leagues Cup, it's going to be really difficult for them to do that travel. Areola, I think, in some ways, look, players might like it better because even though it's more stress on their legs, they're not away from their family for an entire month. So maybe that's the improvement here, but it does seem like one of those things, to be honest, where we'll be talking about a different Leagues Cup format in 2 years.
Right. And it's like, okay, so is it better to go, okay, if I'm Monterrey, I'm going Monterrey, midweek in Houston, then back home, then midweek in St. Louis, then back home, then midweek in Chicago, then back. We all know Chicago's not going to make the knockout round, but
Wow,
it,
Greg
it,
Berhalter's out.
No, but
They
it's
wouldn't even
exactly what you
qualify at the
said.
current format.
They're just changing the issues here, right? Like it's going to be the same issue, just
Yeah.
different
I,
issues.
I'm not, look, like, I got the whole concept of the pause and all those things, and I got why it didn't work. This just seems like another stab at it to try to make something work before, like, a, an eventual merger in some capacity, right? Like, I mean, they're just trying something in some way to make these games happen. But, like, for me, I'll be honest, I'd rather watch them with the Triple C than watch them doing this.
One thing that could be cool about Leagues Cup playing midweek is that you're going to have match nights with like 7 or 8 games on a Wednesday night, which could be fun and drive more exposure to Apple TV. And one of the other big news pieces breaking this week is that, look, we all know it hasn't been a great year for MLS in terms of Apple TV and MLS Cup ratings, which you can't get exact numbers on, but they were probably down. I think we all agree Leagues Pass needs to do something on Apple to improve the viewership. Armand, what's one thing you would change to improve that viewership?
For MLS Season Pass, to me, this whole putting all the games together in one window was a great idea in theory, but in reality, it's just not working out because as when I used to work with in at FC Dallas, if you went to a game, you could not watch another game. It was you're basically done. And like because of just the way that the games are structured, you cannot there's no marquee matchup. Not one game didn't feel like a big game. And the NFL is a good job. You have
Yeah.
Sunday night
Yeah.
football. You have Thursday night football. Now you're adding Saturday games as well with the end of the college season. NFL does a good job of emphasizing big game windows. The Premier League does it as well. You have like in the US, it'd be like a 9 a.m., an 11:30 a.m., and a 6 a.m. They do a good job of these windows. And for me, John, I, you cannot keep up with the league, especially a league as big as MLS, with having one window to watch all these games and maybe one off like 4:30 p.m. game or something like that. To me, they have to look at this idea and say, "Hey, how do we make games seem big? Why isn't there when the NFL season ends a Monday night football? Make a spin-off of it. Why not? Like, is it really going to drive down like people not showing up at the games? Doesn't do it for NFL. I know there's two different things, but still, make it a big deal. Own some nights, and they just don't do a good job with that with all the games happening at once.
To me, the biggest thing they could change to improve viewership is decide who it's for. I think that right
Yeah.
now, the whole product doesn't know if it's for the hardcore fan who wants to be sitting and watching 4 matches on a Saturday and will tune in to every Monday night football like you're pitching Armand after the break, or is it for the casual, the person who already has Apple TV because they want to watch the morning show and oh, they can watch Messi as well. I don't know that you actually have to choose one or the other. You could absolutely have programming that's MLS 101. Hey, we're going to tell you a little bit about why the Hudson River Derby matters. And also say, hey, we're going to tell you why the Red Bulls' new signing, Chapo Moateng, is going to have to outperform his XG for this game to actually go the Red Bulls' way. You could do both. But right now, I think there's kind of in this middle ground, a mushy middle, where there's some storytelling for the newbie, there's some stats for the hardcore to latch onto, but ultimately you kind of get this mush to me watching the product. And I think that, there's changes that can be made in the whip round show, there's changes that can be made in the Spanish broadcast. They're flying the announcers to the matches. Do you notice that? I don't. When I watch the games, they could do a much better job with their on location content. And I think that, there's just a lot that could be done to kind of bring in both of those lanes of fans. But I think targeting one or the other or separating them and targeting both is the biggest change they could make to improve the product, Daniel.
I've always been a big believer that the best way to build a product is to utilize your biggest fans to be your biggest advocates. And I think that in any product you're trying to sell, in any entertainment product, your biggest fans want to be your biggest advocates, but they have to feel accepted as well and have to feel like, okay, they're getting something out of this. And Armand, you mentioned it. If you're an FC Dallas season ticket holder and you go to a game, in theory, if you go to every FC Dallas home game, you are missing half of the games of the league. Period. And one of the big things with Leagues Cup that was cool is you can watch on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I'm not saying MLS should do a whole bunch of midweek games, but that hasn't hurt other leagues to do that in some ways. And they did report, there was a Sports Business Journal report that says, okay, they're going to look to potentially getting like programming into pay TV, TV program guides. I don't know that that's really the issue. Looking to partner with a T-Mobile to get free leagues pass. I
It
mean,
could
it
work with
helps.
YouTube TV, Daniel. Like, do you think
Yeah.
like you
Why is
just
there not
kind of plug it like
integration?
because
Also, it's
they have
called
those
season
things?
pass. You keep calling it leagues
Okay.
pass.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Season pass. Season pass.
he's
Season
used to
ticket.
NBA League Pass,
Yeah.
or a
Season
favorite.
pass.
But yeah, like they could definitely plug it into like YouTube TV or something in some capacity, and it would like that can work because you can just like look up sports on YouTube TV and that could pop up. But I mean, you cannot keep up with the amount of games. It's too much for one person that has a life.
That
I think
you can still separate. You could pick 5 games out of a weekend and still have a busy Saturday night. I am looking forward to getting into this one, guys. The MLS draft is on Friday afternoon. It's been announced that the draft is not going to be streamed anywhere live for the first time, which there's a little bit of nostalgia in me. Back in my days working at FC Dallas, the draft in like 2014, you would go to the city, they would have the league meetings there, and it felt like a genuinely big deal. And players like Walker Zimmerman and Teshu Akindele and like those were going to be big pieces of your team. Now it's not even being streamed online. And John, the Philadelphia Union made a very interesting move last week. They traded all of their draft picks for the next 3 years. So the Rapids already owned one of them. They traded the first and third round pick, and they traded their 3 picks each year to the Rapids for basically 125,000 GAM each year, which isn't really a whole lot of money. What does it say about the draft? Do you think that's a savvy move, or do you think, hey, better to just cut ties and say we don't care at all?
I like it. I
Yeah.
like the Philadelphia Union saying, hey, this is not for us. We want to develop our own talent. They've been pretty consistent on that. You look at what they're doing with Kevin Sullivan, with his brother, obviously the Aronson brothers. It's something that's worked for Philadelphia. So why not? Armand, you're going to say, and I'll let you say your piece. Oh, well, they could have gotten more value and blah, 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 blah. But if we know they don't care about the draft, then the other MLS GMs also know they don't care about the draft. And now they at least say that we know exactly what our war chest of GAM is. We know exactly how much of this stockpile we have that we can use. We don't have to worry about, well, in 2028, are we going to value this the same? Nah. You want this, Rapids? Enjoy. Y'all want to be the Oklahoma City Thunder of MLS? Good luck. Maybe we'll see you in the playoffs in 4 years. But for right now, we're going to try and build our team the way that we think is best. To me, good move. Is it what I would pick? Yeah, actually, probably because I'm a bit of a draft hater. But I see some value in keeping a pick or two. It seems quite extreme, but to me, hey,
I like it.
big. You don't win without big moves, and they're trying something big.
So our Armanas are did the Rapids fleece them?
I mean, with the like value that they'll get from them, yes. And like, but again, like John says, the union don't care. They just want to get rid of them and say, here, take them for what it's worth. This is how much we think it is, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, I don't see the need to trade 3 years in advance. You probably could have gotten the
Why
same
not?
value. You could have gotten the same value if you just waited until that second year or that third year. 1000%.
I disagree. I completely
What
disagree
what if
because what
something happens and you end up with the first and something crazy happens? You're not planning for it. Some
what
stuff
if they
happens. You
cancel
have
the
the first
draft?
overall pick.
What if they cancel all the draft altogether in two
Well, they
years?
can't do that with the CBA.
Why not?
You can't just cancel a draft. They'd have to restructure. What did the NWSL do? They restructure their CBA to make everyone free agents. That wouldn't just happen like that. It would have to be a restructuring of the CBA, which we see MLS doesn't want to get into because it would probably mean that they would have to give up something to the players in some capacity. So for me, I think they could have waited until like 2025, until
You
2025 or
think those
something, or
picks are going to get more
2026.
valuable or less valuable?
They could be more valuable depending on what
Listen,
happens. If they
if
don't
I've
care,
got
they
an
don't care, right?
if
But
I've
like,
got an old vintage T-shirt in my closet that is too small for me because I ate too much Christmas candy, then if I give it away now or if I give it away in 3 years, what does it matter? If I could put it on Grailed or Depop maybe and sell
But
it
like
or tell
what?
people that it was owned
But
by John
I don't
Arnold.
think
That
that's an
increases
apples
the
to apples
value, but
comparison
But he
because
could
what if
spend that
why?
money on
I
something
don't
he wants
want that
now.
anymore. Even if it's cool and sexy, I don't want that anymore. It doesn't do me any good. If it could increase in 3 years because it becomes a vintage product and becomes cool, yes, it could appreciate in value, but I need the value right now. It
Yeah,
serves
but
me
I
better to
mean, the
get this
thing
out of
is
my
with
closet and get something.
the thing is like with like 300K GAM, that's not relative to roster building. That's not that much.
Okay, but the Rapids know that the Union don't need these picks, that they have one of the best academies and they want to actively promote those academy players. So at the same time, they kind of hold all the cards and they say, well, you're not going to use these picks anyways. Is anyone else coming here offering you the money for this?
Right, but like
No. So
right, but like if something crazy happens, you end up with a top 5 pick, okay? We saw how much a top 5 pick can get you in the draft. FC Dallas sent 300K GAM for Logan Farrington as a top 5 pick. That valuation, you don't need that money that they have right now. They don't need that 300K GAM immediately right now. I don't think they don't need it right now. You can maybe do 2 years even, but why the third year? Like who knows what could happen, right? Like I understand that the draft has maybe actually not
diminishing
as much
returns.
value
Yeah.
as people maybe think or don't think or whatever, right? But 2 years I can get, but the third year, I mean, shit. What happens if you have the first? If something happens, Tanner is gone. You somehow the first overall picks in there, and it's like, oh, that's 350, 400K GAM, which is worth more than the entire package that they got. And for the Rapids, I mean, they have like 10 picks. I don't know what they're gonna do with all 10 picks, but like they're
I
like just
mean,
stockpiling and thinking it's an inefficiency. It
they
almost
hit big.
looks like.
They hit big, right? Bombito was an amazing
Mhm.
pick, one of the better picks that we've seen in the last several years. No one saw that coming except maybe the Rapids. And so like credit to them. And if you can get one Bombito out of every 15, 20 draft
Worth
picks
it.
you make, you've won. But that's also the problem, right? Is the value of the draft is 1 in 15, 1 in 20. That not I wouldn't say that 1 in 20 becomes Bombito. 1 in 20 becomes a player that ever sees regular MLS
Like a
minutes.
Christian rolled on, but that's even the best case
Yeah, but that
scenario right
that's
there.
a yeah, that's a long time ago too, man. I just think that things have changed and evolved, and obviously we all know that the player acquisition is not based around the draft anymore. But if you don't see value in the draft, I like fortune favoring the bold and just saying, we're cashing out.
One team that doesn't spend a lot of time building through the draft and aims a lot higher is Atlanta United, and they had a pretty nice little into the season. They upset Miami, obviously, and they've made big moves this week. Not only did they beat them on the field, they just took Chris Henderson away from Inter Miami. Now, if Miami was totally okay with that. It certainly seems that way. But they've hired Chris Henderson to be their CSO to link up with Garth Lagerwey again. Their new training facility addition opens this summer. They've got 2 open DP slots, lots of money, maybe the best executive in the league, Armand. Should we be poised for Atlanta to get back to the top of the league?
Not only that, Daniel, they also have a lot of allocation money because of the Caleb Wiley sale.
Hmm.
MLS implemented the new rule saying they could take profits from a sale and put 3 million of that towards GAM. So
Wow.
they have an extra 3 million in allocation money that they can use, along with, like you said, 2 open designated player spots, 2 open U22 spots, which those are prime positions of building on the
And
salary
they've
cap.
signed players like
And
that.
they've
Yep.
always swung. Have they always hit? No. But they're always gonna swing at the big fence. They brought Miranchuk, who had remember, he came in the middle of the season. You're still acclimating to MLS in the middle of the season, a
He
full
could be
off
a
season.
best
How is he
11
gonna
next year.
perform?
Yeah, he could be a best 11
Exactly.
next year.
And you also have players like Sabalum Tumitse. Well, I might have said his last name kind of
Well
wrong, but I
done. Well
tried my
done.
best. You also have Bartosz Szlisz. You have players that are borderline TAM designated players. And like they have this war chest. Arthur Blank is not afraid to spend money. You have Garth Lagerwey, and like you said, you have Chris Henderson who knows the rules in and out and was able to get Miami roster compliant in some way with Messi and friends being in there. Um, Look, they have all the pieces to be elite next year. There's no question about it. They should be a top 1 or 2 seed next year, and if they're not, that's a complete disappointment in my opinion.
To me, when like we talked about earlier about building more interest in MLS and those sorts of things, if you're the league, to me, Miami versus Atlanta is this rivalry that's built on the field, not manufactured through marketing, that That should be the first game of next year, Miami versus Atlanta, because you have got now, and there is a lot of rumors. I mean, Armand, we've talked a little bit about it. I can't remember who exactly reported it, but the exit of Chris Henderson from Inter Miami, when he deserves a lot of credit for keeping that ship afloat, the exit of him was a little bit contentious, and I think he's going to have a little bit of a bone to pick, and they're going to be aiming for Miami for the next few years, and they've got the leg up on them from the playoffs, John. I think this is a fascinating element to things of the way that Atlanta is going to build over the next few years versus the way that Miami is with Miami's old executive.
And it's very funny too, because for a while Atlanta was Miami. Okay, they weren't
Yeah,
signing Lionel Messi, but they were signing Pite Martinez, who was the reigning South American Player of the Year, and these big time players that other MLS teams weren't bringing
Thiago
in.
Almada.
The
Yeah.
the fact that they are willing to sign players like that, that they are going to sign other players like that, definitely indicates that it should be a good year next year, and they should be able to build something long term. Don't forget, this is the kind of I was going to call it secret sauce, but I mean, dream team, whatever you want to say, that won the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the only MLS team to do it in the modern era since the format switch. So I think that, there's a lot of reason for optimism in Atlanta, not just because, that they have some pieces that could make things work, that showed some things during the playoffs that maybe were able to elevate their game. A big question, though, is who they hire as coach. That's going to make a huge difference in the day to day. We've heard some interesting
I think we
rumblings about
know.
who it could be, who they've talked to. You think it's done?
Well, I don't know that it's done, but Ronnie Delia or
Dalia, yep.
Delia, yeah, Ronnie Delia. He has a very difficult name, like the last name. But
I
I mean,
before
that's a
E.
guy that's an MLS Cup winning coach. But that's an MLS Cup. If they add him, that's an MLS Cup winning coach. And John, that's a great point you made. Of you can make the case that Seattle was the best team in MLS of the decade of the whatever the 2010 to 2020 decade. They were arguably the best team in the league, and these are the two guys that architected it back together in Atlanta.
Absolutely. And I think like with Atlanta, like I said, like if you don't see a top one or two, I think in MLS next year, something's went wrong. Their war chest that they have is, man, you could make an argument. It's probably the biggest war chest that they you could have in league history, just based on the rules and based on what they have.
Do you think there's an actual chest
I,
Yes.
I, I was
in
gonna say I
Firewise
like that
roster?
Adam Schefter tweeted the word war chest like 2 days ago, and now
And
none of
now
us
it's like
can
on the
stop
tip of
saying
my
it. I
tongue.
said it, you said it,
Yeah.
Daniel. Now you're in. Welcome to the war chest, baby.
They're full of MLS doubloons. There's some other moves going on with their former team in Seattle and Dallas. Armand, this has been one that we've talked a lot about, and I think it's fascinating to look at. Now, none of these are official yet, but it certainly seems that that's the way the wind is blowing. And you don't see this a lot with two teams in the same conference, where the proposed deals are Dallas is going to send Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola to the Seattle Sounders. And the return will be some combination of GAM. I think Danny Leva's name has been thrown around quite a bit. This could be something that would get done on draft day potentially if there's draft picks thrown around in it, which that seems small, but Dallas does love the draft. Armand, if Seattle comes away with Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola, FC Dallas comes away with Danny Leva, maybe something else, a combination of Gammon picks. Like, do both teams kind of come out here ahead? I feel like that's kind of where this is.
It's a really interesting move because Seattle's moves are contingent on Paul Oriola accepting a deal after this current deal that would make him a TAM player or a borderline TAM
I
player,
was going to say,
which
potentially not
which
even that.
which is like a salary cut of like 800K or something like that, give or take. Jesus Ferrer would have to accept a deal that says, hey, he's not a DP anymore and he can be bought down in that range. There's a lot of moving parts within this. For Dallas, it represents, hey, they struck out an opportunity to sell Jesus Ferrer at
Yep.
some point. I feel like they didn't strike while the iron's hot. And the Paul Arriola move, while it was great in 2020, it was great in 2022, hasn't really panned out, and his contract is massive on the in a league where these salary things matter. For I don't know. I feel like, look, I feel like Dallas, if Jesus is willing to take a pay cut, I feel like they could send him to Europe, and that might be better off for them in terms of allocation money. Because again, they can convert a portion of that into allocation money, which is probably more than how much they could get. But I think Dallas, John, I think they just want off and they want a complete rebuild. I think they just want to completely just reset and go from there.
It could be good to rebuild the team if you're FC Dallas. Things didn't look like they were clicking most of 2024. For some reason, I still feel like Jesus Ferreira might end up in Liga MX. That would be
I'd love
something
that.
where I think they could probably, there are teams that could pay the salary or if he's willing to take a new deal. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. To me, yeah, I'm sure these discussions are happening. I'm interested to see what actually happens when the ink dries. I think that there could be a number of different ways that this goes.
It's very depressing as a fan. I was bummed when Dallas traded Kellen Acosta way back, and it felt like, okay, there is something sad about you always want to when the homegrown is sold to Europe or Mexico or wherever, it's a completely different feeling. Selling them to arguably in the last 7 or 8 years, your biggest rival and the team that's been the biggest thorn in your side, selling your jewel of your academy in many ways of the last 7 or 8 years to them, I think it's kind of admitting defeat in some ways. And it's a very interesting bookend to a situation where we have seen the narrative of the FC Dallas Academy and producing players. It would be a very interesting bookend to kind of the rise and fall of the FC. Maybe I'm being a little dramatic here, but the rise and fall of the FC Dallas Academy
I
ending
mean,
by
what pro?
selling your
I mean,
player
what
to
prospects
Seattle.
have been produced recent, like within the last couple of years? You can't
Well,
Well,
really.
that's
definitely
part of it,
that
right?
generation. I mean, I think like in some ways you could say, oh, there's other players that are coming through, but in that generation, I think the big kind of names were like Jesus Ferreira, Paxton Pomykal, and maybe Edwin Cerrillo, right? Like
Kellen
those were kind of the
Acosta,
guys that were
Reggie
on that
Reggie
U20
Cannon.
World Cup. Yeah, but even that, those I would say were like a little older guys,
Well,
right?
but Reggie's on Colorado now. If Jesus goes to another MLS team, if Kellen goes to another MLS team, or obviously he is, it's kind of just looking at these guys and thinking like, I realize this happens, right? Like Mason
It
Mount is
does.
not playing for Chelsea, whatever, but it is a little bit of kind of
It's
like
that Dallas Cup team. That 2017 Dallas Cup team was the team that was like, oh, this is gonna be the FC Dallas Academy with Paxton, with Jesus, with Reggie. I mean, we can go kind of on and on down that list. That was like like the jewel of like what we saw with the academy, what brought them to prominence. And now it's like, well, Jesus has kind of just
they're all
been
in other MLS
there.
teams.
Yeah, just kind of been there. They're trying to get, and for Seattle, I mean, they're trying to really work on, hey, you're gonna play in the Club World Cup. Like, come to us. We'll give you a shop window. We'll do this. We'll do this, and just sign a deal. It's gonna be a little bit less. To me, it looks like there's a lot of moving parts, and I think more than likely the Ariola deal gets done.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not 100% sure about the
Sure.
Jesus deal. I think there's definitely another avenue where, hell, maybe an MLS team comes in and says, "We'll pay you the DP money. Just come with us."
Yeah.
And like, why would you want to go? Why would you, if you're Jesus and depends on your mentality, we're not in his head, but if he's more about, the money, which is totally valid, then why not go to that other situation? If he wants to go to Europe, then maybe Seattle's the best thing with, a lot of eyes on the Club World Cup and what's going on in the summer with the matches that they're playing.
And finally, guys, we are at the end of the calendar year. It's holiday time. There's no more soccer in North America between now and January. Liga MX, we're about a month away from. CONCACAF Champions League, we're about 2 months away from. As John shakes his head. Did I get that date wrong a little bit on Liga MX?
January 10th. You're not too far
That's
off.
a
I'm just
month.
sad. I'm just sad. Well,
Oh,
okay, no,
oh,
no, it
that was.
isn't.
I'm sorry. That was a sad shake of your head. Not.
Wow.
I thought you were saying, look at this clown. He doesn't know his League MX calendar.
Well,
Well, anyways, the Concacaf Champions Cup draw happened last week, and as a reminder, there's strangely 27 teams that qualify for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So there's five that advance to the next round, but there's 11 two-leg ties happening in February. And I thought it would be fun for our last segment of the year to look at which ones are our favorites going in. Some of the big ones. Sporting versus Miami, Colorado, wondering how they got paired with an LA team yet again. Armand, which one of these ties kind of stands out to you? Is you're like, okay, this is one that has me a little bit ready for the new soccer year.
Look, John has sold me on Real Esteli, and Real
Oh,
Esteli Tigres has a definite. It seems like it'd be very fun, very cool. Look, I mean, as we all do, I follow John on his beautiful Substack, and seeing the story of Real Esteli and the big matches that they played, I guess this year in 2024, shows that like I'm really excited to see like Tigres go into that environment, and you know. The good thing about the Triple C is now there's like really just kind of fun, interesting like environments
Yeah,
that are coming out,
unique.
and with John's coverage and whatnot, we're seeing more of those and being exposed to more of those. So for me, give me Tigres Real Esteli. I'm excited to see that out of all things, and I don't want to see the MLS matchups. I don't care. Like
John, what about you? I think I know where you're going.
Do you?
Yeah, you mentioned it a
Uh,
little bit.
I'm the team I most want to go see in person is Antigua
That's it. Yeah,
in
that's what I was gonna say.
Guatemala. Looks like a beautiful spot. I've never been able to make it down there. They've got Seattle Sounders, so
Yeah.
could be a decent one. They didn't like play all that well in the Guatemalan playoffs. So, we'll see what they do during the offseason. A lot of these teams are going to use the winter to try and kind of get ready for CCC. I think the best actual first round matchup, not like gaming out the bracket to be like, oh, Inter Miami could play this team. Like the actual matchup that we know we'll see that I think is the best is Saprissa versus the Whitecaps.
Mhm.
Saprissa, a Costa Rican giant, they're trying to get to the Gran Final right now. I did a video today on the great playoff format in Costa Rica that I really enjoy. But Saprissa is kind of trying to get back to that level that they're so often at, which is the clear best team in Central America. That's not the case right now. Alajuelense, their rival, is. But the Whitecaps,
New
transitional
coach.
moment, right? We
Yeah.
don't, yeah, new coach, going to be some new faces, and these games are going to come faster than I think, the front office wants them to. So Saprissa could catch them napping, and the winner of that one likely plays Rayados, depending on if Forge can pull off a huge upset. I'm guessing we'll see Rayados in that next round. So that's the one that I would circle for sporting reasons. Travel wise, we'll see if I end up somewhere else.
Speaking of sporting, for me, it's got to be can Messi do it on a cold February night in Kansas City? John,
I don't know,
that's where
man.
you're from, man. It could
It's
be
true.
10 degrees, right? On the game is on February 18th. Do we think Messi makes that trip even?
I mean, it's better. That's better. That's a better game and situation than some of the preseason games he was playing last year.
Well, that's a good point. And I do think as well, if you're Miami, you're like, damn, think about how much money we're leaving on the table by not being able to play preseason friendlies at this time and having to play CONCACAF Champions Cup games on February 18th and February 25th. I would imagine they'll schedule something probably in that weekend as well as a friendly. We saw they scheduled a game against Club America at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas a couple weeks before this one. But yeah, for me, that one's really interesting because, okay, you never know what Sporting is going to bring to the table. They're always like a very high ceiling, low floor team. They could get absolutely destroyed. Who knows what they're going to do this offseason? They've made a lot of moves. They haven't been afraid to take a shot as well with a guy like Alan Polito. They signed some players. But that's one that I think I'm interested to see what Miami can do against Sporting Kansas City on a cold night in the
Man,
Midwest.
you know who would be furious? I mean, yeah, the easy answer. Oh, CONCACAF, but you know who would be furious if Inter Miami gets knocked out? The country of Jamaica. Because if
Oh,
Messi and Miami win against Sporting Kansas City, they go play Cavalier, and that'll be the national stadium, Messi at the office, which would be
that'd be
something to see as
great.
well, man. But
You got to
maybe
go
you
to
get
that
Alan
game.
Polito. Maybe
You
you
got
get
to go
yeah,
to
Alan
you gotta
that.
go to
Polito
that game.
instead.
You got to go
I
to
mean,
that
look,
game.
if people subscribe to the newsletter, then I can make it happen. But if you're not subscribing, folks, I'm sitting my happy self right here on the Hex.
Well, that's a great way to wrap the show. We hope we've made you all happy today on the Hex as well. And we will catch you. We got probably one more episode coming out, but our next one discussing some of the recent topics. We will catch you in the new year. So thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time on the Hex.